Welcome to, or welcome back to the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and I'm so glad you've joined me for a second episode of the Kadie Major case. If you're not already a subscriber, but enjoy true crime told with common sense and just a little snark, then hit the subscribe button. And if you get halfway through this episode and think, man, this lady sucks, you can always unsubscribe. Because unlike your husband, the internet doesn't care if you change your mind 40 times a day. In our last episode of the Kadie Major case, we looked at what happened the day Kadie and her 10-month-old daughter, River Lynn, were found deceased beside the railroad tracks in Moncks Corner, South Carolina. Kadie's death was ruled suicide and River Lynn's was undetermined. And I'll leave a link to the first episode in the description box so those of you who haven't watched it can get caught up. In our last episode, we ended right before Kadie's funeral. But I want to go back and talk about some things that happened before that I didn't cover in the last episode. So we're going to start with the Wednesday that Kadie and River Lynn died and work our way from there. So you know how I mentioned that Aaron might have a deep, dark secret? Well, I don't know the details, but according to Kadie's dad, he'd learned that there had been some money troubles with Aaron and that Aaron hadn't been honest about them. And it seems as though that came to a head on that Wednesday. Since Aaron worked for Kadie's dad, was it something happening on the job? In his initial statement to the police, Aaron said that he was working on payroll that evening. So was he lying about how many hours he worked, and that was the money issue? I wonder if this is what Kadie was supposedly paranoid about on the night she died. Maybe she was angry with Aaron. I got something wrong in the first episode as well. I thought that Aaron went with Kadie's mother when they went looking for her in the middle of the night, but that didn't happen. According to his statement to police, Aaron had gone out looking for Kadie in the Moncks Corner area for a whole 45 minutes after she'd left. Remember that supposedly Kadie had told him she was wanting to stay at a motel that night. Well, from what I can tell, Moncks Corner itself only has about 2 motels. Then he said he went back home because he thought she'd show up there. After a few hours, he said he went to Somerville, Goose Creek, and the surrounding areas to check the hotels there, and then went back home. And then at 1:44 in the morning, he went to Kadie's parents' house and told them that Kadie was missing. He never asked if they'd heard from Kadie or if Kadie was there. I'm guessing that on a farm there's a lot more places to park a vehicle than just the driveway, especially if someone wasn't wanting to be found. So why didn't he ask about Kadie? It was almost as if he didn't have to because he already knew the answer. After Aaron left their house, he went back home and went to bed. So why would he leave his house, drive to their house to tell them that Kadie was missing, just to then turn around, go back home, and go to bed? And if he really thought that Kadie was having some kind of psychotic break, why didn't he call the police and report her as an endangered missing person? I understand that police will often take a missing persons report seriously in the first 24 hours, but if someone is having a mental breakdown, I would think they would have started looking for her then had they known. And Kadie's phone was broken at this time, so there was no way for anyone to contact her. But phone records prove that Kadie had used Aaron's phone to talk to her mother at the time that he was in the shower. Aaron said he didn't get out of the shower until around 8 p.m., but those phone records showed that Kadie had talked to her mother around 6:45, and she had told her that Aaron was in the shower. So unless Aaron takes showers that last for more than an hour, someone isn't telling the truth, and I happen to think it's Aaron that's the liar. And when Kadie was on the phone with her mother, she didn't say anything about spending the night at a motel, and she didn't mention leaving home at all. If Kadie really had left the house that night of her own accord, was she trying to get to her mother's? Her truck wasn't too far from the main road she would have taken to get to her mother's farm. So her truck was found on Thursday, January 18th on Oakley Road, east of the railroad tracks, and it was parked at the end of someone's driveway. I've checked on who owned the property at the time, but I haven't found any connection to Kadie's case. And not only was she parked in someone's driveway, it was a driveway that was 500 feet from the railroad tracks. If she was planning on ending her life and using a train to do so, I think she would have parked closer to the tracks and then just jumped in front of the train there at the crossing. Why walk almost a tenth of a mile to the tracks and then walk another 6/10 of a mile down the tracks carrying a 30-pound child in the sleet? It just doesn't make sense. According to a Post and Courier article, when police searched Kadie's truck, They found a religious book, River's diaper bag, and $1,000 cash. According to Aaron, they kept envelopes of cash in a filing cabinet as a way to save money. But was the money they found in the truck some that Kadie had taken from the house to use to get away? Or was the money planted there by Aaron to make it look as though Kadie had left on her own? I'm not convinced that Kadie had actually driven anywhere that night, though. She wore glasses and couldn't see to drive very well without them. But that night, she hadn't taken them with her. They were still at her house. Now, I suppose if she did have to leave in a hurry, she might have accidentally left them. And remember how Aaron's hand was swollen and he wasn't using it to open the truck door on the day that he and Kadie's mother, Vicky, had gone looking for Kadie, which was Thursday, January 17th? His hand was so bad he couldn't write a statement the next day about what happened the night Kadie left the house. He told the investigators he couldn't write it because he was too distraught, but I don't believe that for a nanosecond. I think he couldn't write it because he couldn't use that hand. On Friday, when the family had gathered at Kadie and Aaron's house to discuss the funeral, Kadie's mother went into Kadie and Aaron's bedroom, and the drawers in Kadie's dresser were pulled out, and her clothing was hanging out of them. It also looked as though someone was packing to leave in the bathroom. So did Kadie and Aaron have a fight because Kadie was trying to leave that night? And did the fight escalate from there? What if Kadie was killed at the house that night and later taken to the railroad tracks? Aaron made an excuse about the dresser being in disarray, and that was that he had done it while looking for something for Kadie to wear at her funeral. And again, I don't believe him. The next day, both sides of the family went to the funeral home to make arrangements. Aaron was answering questions for some of the paperwork when the funeral director received a phone call from the coroner. The coroner was letting her know Kadie's time of death. Kadie's mother said that when Aaron learned what the phone call was about, he went pale and then stumbled over the remaining questions. So why did that phone call shock him? Was there something about the time of death that would have made him look guilty? Was he worried they were going to put her time of death early enough that it could have happened before she ever left the house? And when the families walked into the room to choose a casket, Aaron did something that is just a little nuttikins. He got on the floor and started spinning around on his belly. Then his father barely walked into the room before he yelled that Aaron had broken his hand. I'm sorry, who thought that scenario was a good way to explain a broken hand? And did anyone believe that he'd broken his hand by getting down on the floor and pretending he was a sea lion or whatever he was supposed to be doing? What exactly is wrong with these people? And then later, according to Rick Olick, the initial Boy Wonder investigator, the funeral director saw Aaron punch a cinder block wall at the funeral home. So Aaron definitely hurt his hand by punching a wall and also by lying down on the floor spinning on his tum-tum, but his hand was swollen 2 days before any of this happened. His parents took him to the emergency room that day where they learned that he had a broken hand. Before the funeral, Aaron had a very strange wish. Kadie had somehow miraculously not received any damage to her face, so her funeral had an open casket. Again, I have trouble believing that Kadie was hit by something sticking out of the side of a train or ran into the side of a train and didn't have any damage to her face. So Kadie and River Lynn were together in one casket. Aaron wanted the unborn child to be shown in the casket with them. The 4-month-old fetus. Nothing against fetuses, but at this stage, they still kind of look like an alien. And it's just bizarre that he wanted his unborn child to be displayed. Thankfully, Aaron was talked out of that. He also asked the funeral director to cut off a lock of Kadie's hair so he could keep it. Now, in the Victorian era, it was typical for a family member to get some of the hair of the deceased. It always skeeved me out because I'm quite averse to disembodied hair. The decedent's loved ones would place the hair in lockets or brooches and even create hair art from it. So taking hair from the deceased was normal for the Victorians. But you know what else the Victorian era Fruit Loops did? They ate mummies for medicinal purposes. And then when they figured out that wasn't working, they would have mummy unwrapping parties. Of course, this was only for those wealthy enough to buy a mummy in the first place. But they go to Egypt, pick out their mummy, and have it sent home, and then have parties where they'd sit around and watch someone unwrap the poor long-deceased soul. And why did they do this? Because they were Fruit Loops. They were probably full of arsenic and lead and were bonkers on laudanum, which I guess could lead you to do some pretty cuckoo banana stuff. So, was Aaron following in the footsteps of his Victorian ancestors, or did he want Kadie's hair as a trophy? Kadie's funeral was held the following Monday, with a viewing prior to the funeral. At the viewing, Kadie's family said that Aaron behaved strangely. He was on the front row, eating McDonald's, with Kadie and River Lynn in the open casket right in front of him. And I understand that people have to eat, but I don't know that I could bring myself to do so when I'm front and center at the viewing of anyone who's died, much less my spouse and child. But the funeral was at 11 in the morning, so I'm guessing the viewing probably started around 9. So he couldn't have eaten breakfast before showing up. Kadie's family also said that Aaron never hugged anyone and never showed any emotion. He also wanted to be the only one present when the funeral home closed the casket, but Kadie's mother told him that wasn't going to happen. She was going to be there to see her daughter and granddaughter one last time. The day after the funeral, Aaron had surgery on his hand, and Kadie's father let him know that he would no longer be needed at his business. 8 days after Kadie and River Lynn's bodies were found, Aaron was called into the police department for an interrogation, and that's what we'll cover in our next episode, his interview with police and his initial statement. Thank you so much for being here. If you've made it this far, please give the video a like, share it with, well, whoever you want to share it with, and leave a comment with your thoughts on Kadie's case so far. I'll be back soon with episode 3 of Tracking Down a Killer. Until then, stay safe and be happy.